Ivy Colston did not drop the basket when the footman told her to use the servants' entrance. She adjusted her grip on the handle and walked through the front door anyway. They called her the orchard woman. They called her the girl who ran off. The bolder ones, the ones fortified by champagne and a duke's hospitality, called her nothing at all. As if withholding her name might shrink her down to something they could finally stop noticing. She set the jar of quince preserve on the receiving table herself, because the caterer's boy had gone pale and would not touch it. Beside the jar she set down a battered account book, tied shut with twine, its corners gone soft from 5 years of handling. She did not open it. She never had to. The numbers inside it were the only thing in that house that had never lied to her. Guests drifted past the open doors in silk and borrowed jewellery, glancing in, saying nothing, doing nothing. A duchess to be laughed somewhere beyond the hall, bright and practised. Ivy did not look toward the sound. She had learned, a long time ago, that the surest way to survive a room like this one was to need nothing from it. Then the door at the far end opened, and 2 small shapes slipped through it before anyone could stop them. A boy and a girl, 4 years old, hand in hand, wandering into a receiving hall full of strangers, because they had grown bored of waiting in the carriage. A man across the room went completely still. He had not seen Ivy Colston in 5 years. He had never seen the 2 small faces now peering out from behind her skirts, wide-eyed at the candlelight. Until this exact moment, he had not known they existed at all. Virginia Hill country. Autumn, 1784. If a story like hers has already got its hooks in you this early, that is exactly the kind of story worth staying for. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel now, and let's keep going. The truth, which the room did not know, and would not have believed if it had, was simple. Ivy Colston had never written the letter that ended her marriage. Someone else had held the pen, copied her hand from old correspondence, and signed her name to words she had never spoken. Everyone in that hall believed a wife had run off in disgrace. Only 2 people in Virginia knew otherwise, and one of them had spent 5 years making certain the other never found out. Julian Wren, Duke of Alderley, had been half a minute from asking Lady Cassandra Fenwick to marry him. The ring was in his coat pocket. The words had been rehearsed for a week, the way he rehearsed everything now, carefully, at a distance, the way a man handles something he has already decided not to feel too much about. He had built a life out of that careful distance since the spring his wife disappeared. He was not cold. He was tired. There is a difference, though very few people in Alderley County had ever bothered to learn it. He crossed the hall before he had decided to. Cassandra's voice trailed off behind him, confused, then annoyed. He did not hear it. He was looking at a boy with his own dark brows, and a girl with his late mother's exact shade of copper hair, and he was doing arithmetic he had never let himself do before. Ivy, his voice came out rougher than he intended. She met his eyes without flinching. Your Grace. 2 words, not 1 syllable of warmth in either of them, and he felt the absence of it like a hand against his chest. Whose are they? He asked, and then, because the answer was already assembling itself behind his ribs, Ivy, who's mine, she said. That is all you are owed tonight. The room had gone quiet in that specific way rooms go quiet when they sense a scandal arriving ahead of schedule. Ivy did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She took the boy's hand, then the girl's, and inclined her head to the Duke as if he were any other customer come to collect an order. The preserve is paid for, she said. Good evening. She was 3 steps toward the door, when he spoke again, low enough that only she could hear it. 5 years, he said. You let me believe 5 years of nothing. She stopped. She did not turn around. I let you believe what your steward told you to believe. There's a difference, Your Grace, and I would think a man in your position would have learned by now to ask which one he's dealing with before he signs the papers. Then she walked out into the dark with 2 children who were, unmistakably, his, and left him standing in his own receiving hall with a ring in his pocket and a proposal he suddenly could not remember a single word of. He did not sleep that night. He sat in his study with a lamp burned low and a stack of correspondence he had not touched in 5 years, hunting for a letter he had once been certain he understood. It was there, her hand, or something close enough to fool a grieving man who had not wanted to look too closely. 4 lines, cold and final, releasing him from a marriage she claimed she had never wanted. He had read those 4 lines 100 times in the weeks after she left, until they had worn a groove in him he mistook for healing. He read them again now, slower, the R in Wren curled the wrong way. Ivy's R never curled like that. He set the letter down very carefully, the way a man sets down something he has just realized might be a weapon. Somewhere in the house behind him, a floorboard creaked, and Percival Dray, the estate's long-time steward, withdrew quietly from the study door he had been listening at for the better part of 10 minutes. The estate Ivy Colston built after leaving Alderley sat 2 miles down the post road, 11 acres of orchard and herb beds she had cleared herself with a hired man and a mule, in the first hard winter after the twins were born. She had arrived with nothing but a name she no longer wanted to use, and a settlement she had refused down to the last shilling of it, keeping only enough to buy the land outright and owe no one anything. You could have taken his money, said Hetty, the housekeeper who had come with the property and stayed out of stubbornness more than wages. Lord knows the man had enough of it. I know what I could have taken, Ivy said, grafting a scion onto a young apple stock with hands that did not shake. I know what it would have cost me to take it. And what's that? Being owned twice by the same family. Ivy tied off the graft with waxed thread, precise, unhurried. A graft only takes if both pieces are cut true. Money from a man who thinks he's paying off a mistake isn't a graft. It's a bandage. It doesn't grow anything. Hetty snorted, which was as close to agreement as she ever came. 2 days after the ball, a rider came up the lane with a letter bearing the ducal seal. Ivy did not open it at the table. She read it standing at the door, twins asleep upstairs, Hetty pretending not to watch her face. The letter asked, plainly, for an accounting. Not of the children, of the estate. Alderley's books had not balanced in 3 years, the letter said, and a mortgage was coming due that the land could not support if the numbers were true. Julian had heard from more than 1 quarter that Mrs. Colston kept the finest ledgers in the county. He was asking her to look at his, not a summons. A request, oddly humble for a man who had once been able to command half of Virginia with a raised eyebrow. He wants you back in that house, Hetty said. He wants his numbers to balance. Ivy folded the letter along its original crease. Those are different things. She went anyway, not for him. She told herself that on the whole ride there, in a borrowed trap with her account book on her knees, and she was still telling herself that, when Julian met her in the drive and she saw, for 1 unguarded second, something in his face that looked exactly like relief. "You came," he said. "I came to look at your ledgers," she said. "Don't mistake the two." He almost smiled. It was the first time in 5 years she had seen it, and she hated how easily she still recognised it. A small, involuntary tug at the corner of his mouth, gone as fast as it arrived. Like a man catching himself feeling something and putting it away before it could be counted against him. "Understood," he said. "The study's this way." She followed him inside, ledger under her arm, and did not let herself look at the staircase where, 5 years ago, she had walked down for the last time believing she had chosen to leave. The Alderley account books were worse than Julian had let on. Ivy saw it inside the first hour, entries too round to be honest. A supplier paid twice for the same delivery of seed corn, a line of estate maintenance that swelled every autumn and never once specified what had been maintained. "Who keeps these?" she asked, not looking up. "Dre does. Has since my father's time." Julian stood at the window, arms crossed, watching her the way he used to watch weather come in over the ridge, carefully, reading it before it arrived. "He was my guardian's man before he was mine. I trust him." "You trusted me once too," Ivy said, and let the silence after it do the rest of the work. He did not answer that. She had not expected him to. She worked 3 evenings that week, then 5 the next, the twins minded by Hetty, while Ivy sat across the study table, from a man she had once been married to, and now addressed the way she addressed any client, plainly, without warmth, without unnecessary words. The numbers did not care about either of their feelings, and for a while that made the room easier to sit in. "Here," she said on the 4th evening, sliding a page toward him. "August, 3 years running. Seed corn, paid twice. Same vendor. Same amount, to the penny, both times." "An error," Julian said. "Errors don't happen at the same figure 3 years in a row." She tapped the column. "This isn't a mistake. It's a habit." He was quiet a long moment, jaw tight. "You're telling me Dre is stealing from me. I'm telling you the numbers don't line up. What you do with that is yours to decide." She closed the book, precise as always, and did not offer him comfort he had not asked for. "I only read ledgers, Your Grace. I don't tell men what to believe." "You could have, once," he said quietly. "I would have listened." "You didn't," she said, "the one time it mattered," and she watched something in his face fold in on itself, and she did not take the words back, because they were true, and because for 5 years she had wanted to say them and had never once had the chance. He offered her money that same week, not payment for the ledgers, which she took and priced fairly, but more, a sum meant to settle the twins' future, meant, she suspected, to settle his own conscience faster than the truth could catch up with him. She refused it in the drive, in front of Hetty, in front of a groom, pretending very hard to check a horse's shoe. "I am not here because I couldn't afford to raise them alone," Ivy said. "I have raised them alone for 5 years, on 11 acres I bought with my own money, and I will go on doing it whether or not you feel better about the letter you didn't check the handwriting on." "Ivy, I'll take fair wages for fair work," she said. "That's all. Not a rescue. Not a settlement. Not a way to make 5 years disappear because you finally noticed the arithmetic." She climbed into the trap without waiting for the groom. "There's a difference, and I'd think you'd want to learn it before you go proposing to anyone else." He stood in the drive long after the trap had turned out of sight, the ring still, absurdly, in his coat pocket, where it had sat untouched since the night of the ball. The county did not let the matter rest quietly, and it came to a head at the Fenwicks' harvest dinner 3 weeks later, where Ivy had been asked, pointedly, to attend as the woman settling the Duke's accounts, a phrase Lady Fenwick delivered with a smile sharp enough to cut cloth. How resourceful, Cassandra's mother said, over the soup, to a table of 20, a tradeswoman keeping his Grace's books. And his children, apparently, though I understand the paternity was never formally established. The table went quiet in the particular way tables go quiet when they are hoping for blood. Ivy set down her spoon. The paternity was established the day they were born, Lady Fenwick. What wasn't established until 3 weeks ago was that His Grace had been lied to about where I'd gone and why. She did not raise her voice. She never did. As for the accounts, Alderley's tenant farms will see a mortgage default inside 18 months if the estate steward isn't questioned under oath. I'd worry less about my resourcefulness and more about that if I were at this table. Silence. Afork sat down somewhere. That's a serious claim to make at dinner, someone said. It's a serious set of numbers, Ivy said. I don't make claims. I read ledgers. Julian, at the head of the table, set down his glass and looked at Percival Dray, who had gone the colour of old parchment. She's right, Julian said. Quiet. Final. The words landing in that room like a door closing somewhere far off. I've seen the pages myself. Mr. Dray will account for them, or he won't. But he'll do it under oath, not over soup. Lady Fenwick's smile did not survive the sentence. Cassandra glanced at Julian with something that looked less like heartbreak and more like relief finally given permission to surface. The room did not applaud Ivy Colston. It did something rarer. It went quiet the way a room goes quiet when it has just watched itself be wrong. The confession came later that same week, not the one anyone expected. Julian found her at the orchard at dusk, checking a graft she'd made that spring, the bark already healing seamless over the joint. He watched her hands a moment before he spoke. I found the original letter, he said, the one Dray gave me. I had it looked at by a man in Williamsburg who reads hands for a living. It isn't yours. It was never yours. Ivy's fingers stilled on the graft. I know, she said. I've known for 5 years. I just never had a way to prove it that anyone with a title would believe. I should have known your writing better than a stranger with a magnifying glass. You should have asked me, she said. Instead you asked a letter. He did not argue that. He deserved worse than silence, and she gave him silence anyway, which was its own kind of mercy. There's a portrait of my mother in the East Hall, he said instead, after a while. Your daughter has her hair. I looked at it every day for 5 years and never once let myself wonder why it made me think of you. Grief does that, Ivy said. It keeps you from counting things you're afraid to add up. Is that what this has been? Grief? For both of us. She wound the last of the waxed thread and stepped back from the tree. I buried a marriage I didn't choose to end. You buried a wife you thought had chosen to leave you. We've both been standing at the same grave for 5 years, Julian. Neither of us dug it. He almost said something else. She watched him almost say it, watched the words gather and then fold back down, unspoken, the way they always had between them at the moments that mattered most. It was not the time yet. They both seemed to know that without needing to say it aloud. Dray struck before the magistrate could be summoned properly, because a cornered man moves faster than a patient one. 3 days after the dinner, a filing arrived at the county court naming Ivy Colston an unfit guardian, citing her unexplained 5-year absence, her trade as a common orchard woman, and the part that made Hetty go white with fury. A claim that the twins, as the Duke's only heirs, ought to be placed under estate guardianship, pending a full inquiry into their mother's character. Under estate guardianship, which Dray, as steward, would administer. He's not after the children, Ivy said, staring at the paper with hands gone very still. He's after control of the estate before anyone can prove what's in those ledgers." "Can he do that?" Hetty asked. "Take them?" Ivy did not answer right away. Outside, the twins were laughing at something in the yard, small and bright, and entirely unaware that a man they had never met was, at that moment, trying to write them into someone else's ledger. "He can try," she said finally, and her voice had gone very quiet and very even, the way it always did right before she stopped being afraid and started being exact. "He forged one document 5 years ago, and it worked. He thinks paper is the only weapon that matters." She reached for her own account book, the battered one, tied in twine, and set it on the table like a hand of cards finally being shown. "He forgot I kept copies." The hearing was held in the county courthouse on a grey morning in late October, Judge Aldous Crane presiding, the room packed tighter than it had been in a decade, because half the county wanted to watch the other half be proven wrong. Dre's counsel spoke first, painting Ivy as an unstable woman who had abandoned her marriage and now sought, conveniently, to reattach herself to a title. Julian sat rigid through it, jaw locked, saying nothing, because it was not his turn yet. Then it was. Ivy stood, opened her book, and did not raise her voice once in 40 minutes. She laid out the seed corn payments, 3 years, same figure, same vendor, side by side on the table for the judge to see with his own eyes. She laid out the maintenance line that swelled every autumn against no invoice anyone could produce. She laid out, last, the forged letter itself, and beside it a fair copy of her own hand from a delivery receipt dated the same month, the R that curled the correct way, every time, without exception, for 5 years running. "Mr. Dre forged this letter," she said, "to end a marriage that was inconvenient to a scheme he'd been running since before I arrived at Alderley. When I discovered discrepancies in his accounts, he needed me gone before I could say so aloud. A grieving man with a broken letter was easier to manage than a wife with a working set of eyes. This is speculation, it's arithmetic, Ivy said, and set the last page down. I don't speculate. I read ledgers. Judge Crane examined the pages for a long time in a silence nobody dared break. When he looked up, he looked first at Dre. Mr. Dre, he said, you may explain yourself now, under oath, or I will have the sheriff take these books to Williamsburg and let a bank examiner explain you instead. I'd advise the former. It tends to go better for a man's neck. Dre broke exactly the way men like him usually do, not with defiance, but with a long, deflating silence, and then a confession delivered to the floor rather than to any face in the room. 12 years of skimming. One forged letter, written in a rented room, to remove the one person sharp enough to catch him. He was not hanged. He was stripped of his post, his accounts seized, and given a choice between prosecution and quiet removal from the county by nightfall. He chose the road. Justice, in the end, took exactly what it needed, and left the rest, which was, Ivy thought, watching him go. More mercy than she'd have offered 5 years ago, and exactly the right amount now. The petition for guardianship was dismissed before the ink on the dismissal was dry. Julian found her on the courthouse steps afterward, the crowd thinning around them, Hetty already herding the twins toward the trap. I have something for you, he said. Not money. I know better now. He held out a single folded page. She opened it there, on the steps. It was a document in his own hand, witnessed and sealed, entering into the Alderley estate records a full accounting of her work, the audit, the ledgers. The discovery that had saved the tenant farms from a mortgage, default no one else had caught in time. Her name, spelled correctly, entered permanently into a book that would outlast both of them. I wanted it written somewhere that couldn't be forged out from under you again, he said. Ivy read it twice. Her hands, for the first time in 5 years, were not entirely steady. This isn't a proposal, she said. No, he agreed. I have one of those too, if you'll let me finally say it out loud instead of rehearsing it for someone I never should have chosen in the first place. Say it, then. I love you, he said, plainly, the way he said everything that mattered, without ornament, without performance. 5 years, and one forged letter, too late but not, she found. Too late to matter. I loved you before I understood what I was looking at, and I've spent 5 years grieving a woman who was 2 miles down the road the entire time. Raising 2 children I should have known were mine the moment I saw them. I'm not asking you to fix that. I'm asking if there's any room left once it's fixed. Ivy looked at him a long moment. Behind her the twins had gone quiet, watching, small and solemn. I don't need rescuing, she said. I never did. I know, he said. I'm not offering that. I'm offering to be useful to a life you've already built, if you'll have me in it. She took his hand. She did not say yes with words, not yet. She said it the way she said most things that mattered, in an action instead of a declaration, her fingers closing around his on the courthouse, steps in front of half the county. And it was enough, and everyone watching understood exactly what it meant. 10 years later, the orchard at what had once been Ivy Colston's 11 acres had grown to 60, grafted and regrafted until the rows ran clean and true down toward the river, and beside the orchard stood a long timber schoolhouse with a brass plate over the door that read, simply, the Alderley Ledger School, founded by I. Wren. She had built it for girls the county would otherwise have overlooked, tenant daughters, tradeswomen's children, orphans with sharp eyes, and no one to teach them what a column of figures could do for a person who understood it. Twice a year the county's merchants sent their sons to learn accounts from women half their age who could catch a false entry faster than any clerk in Williamsburg. And the county, which had once called her the orchard woman as an insult, now used the same words as a credential. Lady Fenwick, older and considerably humbled, had written Ivy a stiff, formal letter of apology the year the school opened, and had since sent 2 nieces to study there, a fact she mentioned at every dinner party, as though it had been her idea from the start. Cassandra had married a shipping merchant from Charleston, and wrote Ivy every Christmas, cheerful letters that never once mentioned the ring that had, for one strange evening, nearly been meant for her. Percival Dray was never heard from again, and the county, on the whole, considered that the fairest verdict of all. The twins, 12 now, spent their mornings in the schoolhouse, and their afternoons in the orchard, and it was Hazel, the daughter, who could already graft a scion as clean as her mother's, and Asa, the son, who kept the estate's smaller accounts for practice, and caught, at 11, a genuine clerical error that saved the household $4 and change, a fact he mentioned for a full year afterward. Julian governed Alderley differently than his father had, differently than he himself once had. He kept his own books now, and checked every hand that wrote in them twice, and he had long since stopped being the coldest man in the county. Though the almost smile never fully vanished, it simply had somewhere warmer to land these days, and it landed there often. Some evenings Ivy still walked the orchard rows alone at dusk, running a thumb along a graft 10 years healed, the joint so seamless now You would need to know exactly where to look to find the scar at all. A graft only takes if both pieces are cut true, she used to say, and she still believed it, though she had learned since then that some grafts take slower than others, and are no less whole for the waiting. She had been called the orchard woman, the girl who ran off, nobody at all. She answered now to none of those. She answered to her own name, spoken plainly, entered permanently into a ledger that could no longer be forged out from under her. That was the whole of it, and it was enough, and it was everything. If the moment Julian went still in that receiving hall stayed with you the way it stayed with me, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. And tell me in the comments, what was it, for you, the exact instant you knew he finally saw her clearly? The ledgers, the courthouse steps, or the letter he wrote in his own hand? I'd love to know, and while you're there, tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Ivy's story travels. Another one is already waiting for you.